episode of Soundbites. Today, we're joined with Nick Mehta from Gainsight, and he covers a lot of topics, but a few leap out at me. People for certain moments, how people have certain stages within their company. He'll discuss that topic. The CEO as a sprinkler. Your role is to spray all of the different areas of the grass. And vulnerability and being real, and the importance of that with your customers and with your employees. So stay tuned for a great episode. Welcome and greetings, everybody, to the third season of Battery's Soundbites. I'm Bill Binch, your host. I'm an operating partner here, and I'm super excited to be kicking off the season with the one and only Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight. So Nick, I'll give a rundown about you in a second, but welcome to the show.
Great to see you, Bill. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Me too. I'm pumped up. So let me give a quick background on Nick, and then we'll dive into some questions. So Nick, an esteemed biochemistry undergrad, who then that wasn't enough, decided that background wasn't rigorous enough of an education, needed to go get a computer science master's, all from Harvard. So well done on the education side. Nick in his professional career has been in product marketing, has worked at investment companies, has worked at software companies. He's founded a company, been through several acquisitions, and then this thing called Gainsight comes along. And this is a business that Nick took over the CEO role, grew this to $200 million, made acquisitions, and then back in 2020 sold this business to Vista Equity for over $1 billion. Yet you're still here as the CEO.
Yes.
You're still here, which I'll whisper to all the listeners that typically when your company gets bought, you hang out for a while and you exit, but Nick's still here. And we're going to talk about that. That's going to be one of our topics that we do delve into today. So anyways, Nick, as a leader, as a CEO, you have a well-documented past for being transparent and openly sharing on all topics, especially around leadership. You're a creator, you're a philosopher, you're obviously a lover of all things customer success after 12 years of being inside of Gainsight. That's clear. You're a user of music and song lyrics to telegraph thoughts. And who could leave it out? You're a huge dedicated Swiftie as well.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the logical place to start. I need to know from you, Nick, how many times have you gone and seen Taylor live?
Twice in the previous concerts, but in this era, the Eras Tour, a cheesy joke. Seen him twice, have another one in November, trying to figure out some business travel excuse to go to a fourth one. So yeah, I'm addicted for sure.
That's great. A lot, we have some people inside of Battery that have gone over to other countries because of what everybody reads about, that like the cost of airline tickets, hotels, and Taylor tickets is less expensive to do that than to stay here in the States.
100%. Yeah, that's what I need to figure out a way to do that next.
Crazy. Well, we talk about eras before we leave Taylor. Is there a favorite album that you have?
Well, if you are a Taylor, if you're a Swiftie, this is basically the hardest question somebody could ask you. And constantly discussing what are my top 3, top 5. But out of the 11, always number 1 is Folklore, which is when she transitioned to more, adult, not like kind of not just the relationship stuff. And it's a beautiful album. Most people consider it her best. So. Got it.
I'm a 1989 fan myself.
It's great. 89's great too. It's fun. We even did a parody of Blank Space years ago at Gainsight. So
I caught this, I think it was on Country Music Channel. It was this summer sometime. She did a live concert with Def Leppard. I think it's 2008. I want to go back to.
In the day. I see. Yeah.
It's a young Taylor with Def Leppard, and like they have a bunch of sidebar sessions where they say, well, why are you doing this? And she was way more country back then. She was in the process of crossing over to pop. And they said, why are you doing this? And she said, well, who didn't grow up singing Pour Some Sugar on Me? So
seriously, me too, by the way.
There's a whole thing there. So anyways, all right, well, good to know. So 4 times and Folklore. Good to know. I don't know. Has that come out publicly before? That might be like the disclosure of that.
Folklore. Well, the like extreme, like, are you real Swiftie is, you won't be able to see it, but I actually have a tattoo of a lyric from Folklore. So okay. That's the level of deranged commitment I have to being a Swiftie.
I love the commitment. All right, cool. Well, I thought that was a great icebreaker. Let's move into some business topics here, Nick. I'm going to reference several things that you've posted publicly because I really want to tap into your mindset around these things, and other people that are listening may have read your posts. So You had a LinkedIn post recently about the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
I really want to call it the Freddy Krueger effect, but I'll try to simplify what the Dunning-Kruger effect is. It's where an individual will overestimate your skills in your own mind. And you talked about in this post that as a first-time CEO, it looked easy to do the job. Or as you were getting your first-time CEO job, prior to that, it always looked easy to do. But once you got into the seat itself, it was really, really hard. You made a lot of mistakes in that. Now, fast forward to your next CEO gig coming into Gainsight, and this time you're going to get it right. You're going to nail it. But again, you made a lot of mistakes.
Absolutely.
And that's the setup for the question. So the question is, in hiring people, we a lot of times look for executives based on their experience, based on their playbooks, based on the success that they've driven. Yet, as we know, the business world evolves. You said it in this post that you were a first-time CEO, made a lot of mistakes, and then went to Gainsight, and then again made a lot of mistakes. Some of the same ones, some new ones. So in thinking about that mindset of hiring executives, just because they did it once doesn't guarantee their success for the future. So in your opinion, do hiring managers, yourself to hiring managers in your organization, do we overestimate the past and not look enough at potential? And I'm curious, how would you screen for that?
Yeah, it's a lot of good things inside that. I think so. Yes, once you've done something a long time, being CEO, whatever, you eventually realize, God, it's unknowable to know everything. There's no way I'm going to get it all right. I mean, I'm haunted every night by the list of mistakes I made at Gainsight and the number of mishires. And I think you're right that part of it is you assume past results indicate future performance, which, you see commercials for financial products and they always say past performance does not indicate future results. And I think it's very true. In fact, I read a study once that there is, you could have a super successful CEO of a public company and there's no correlation to them being successful again. We think of the outliers, the people that did it over and over again, but they're outliers. Most people, I'm a huge sports fan and NFL coaches, sometimes they're great on one team and they're terrible with another. And so you feel like you lose something. So what have I learned? I mean, one thing specifically is that there are people for certain moments and they will not work out for future moments. And it's very rare that somebody lasts through many eras, using the cheesy cliche from before, that they keep going, that it's okay that somebody is there 3 or 4 years and then they hit a ceiling. And that wasn't always a failure on your part, on my part. It's that's what mostly happens. And every now and then you have somebody who can go 8, 9, 10 years, but that's very rare. Number two is, for me, I think if you're running some unfettered rocket ship, NVIDIA itself had an interesting founding story, but some company that just has grown nonstop the whole way, yeah, you probably can hire the person that worked at the big companies and you want that scale and all that. The reality is most people, honestly, most companies, getting somebody who's a grinder is more valuable. Most of SaaS, which is the world I live in, is a grind. So what do I look for? People that have been in successful companies that were a grind. For example, Marketo, as far as I know, was not easy, and you guys built a great business. And so, I know it's quite back in the day for you, but you guys, we hired a lot of Marketo people at Gainsight, and they were very good because they're used to the grind. So I look for people that have worked at companies where it wasn't easy. They didn't have the massive tailwind. I love Salesforce. I love Google. It's hard to hire people from those companies because a lot of them have never lived in a world where you have to, every day, you just have to make it happen because there's no tailwind,
I'll give a couple comments on your first part about people for certain eras, people for certain moments. I'm friends with Mark Huffman. He was the CEO of Blackline most recently. And NetSuite guy for a lot of years. And I'm giving full credit to him because I saw him present this one time. And this really only plays for maybe the US crowd that's listening to this, because this is a very US book, but there's a famous book in the, kind of American canon called Old Yeller. Mm-hmm. And it's the story about a boy's, evolution from boyhood into manhood. But anyways, at the end of the book, it's a very sad kind of end. He has to take this dog named Old Yeller, who's been this family dog, out back and shoot him because
Bringing
because
back sad memories. Yeah, exactly. That's
'cause
I remember that book as a kid.
sad fuck. So, the dog's been epic dog, saved the kids from like a snake attack and stuff, but the dog gets bit by a raccoon or something and it gets rabies. And so you have to put it out. And Mark talks about that in the business world, that there's sometimes that you have a halo around your head for a certain period of time and perform really well. And then you get to a point where you get bit by the rabies, or you get bit by the raccoon and get the rabies, and you have to, like move out of that. So I think that it's amazing how many leaders, Nick, I speak with that share that same concept, that say that, look, most people are not Jeff Bezos and found a company and then 30 years later are still running. Well, now he's riding around a boat, but so anyways, very true. And then on the grinder mindset of how you had to work, that's exactly right. This is the old Avis, tagline. We're number 2, so we try harder, because they knew
we try harder, right? Yeah.
And I love that mindset, and I love trying to find that motivational drive inside of people that I've hired in the past as well.
That's awesome. Love it.
That's good stuff. All right, let's go to another post that you recently wrote. So you posted about why you're still at Gainsight after 12 years. This goes back to the preamble that most people that are CEO that then get a strategic investment or sell their company don't stay around for that long, but you did. And you talked about the love of the work. You talked about the love of the teams. Your teams are investors, employees, and customers. And then you talked about the love of looking out what's next, the windshield, look out with the windshield. But you said, upon reflection in this post, the real reason that you stuck around was to observe people's growth. And in that post, you mentioned like a CSM, a customer success manager that came in as an individual contributor and 10 years later as a chief customer officer out in the world, or an alumni of your staff that is now a CEO of their own company, or the person that was at Gainsight, left, but boomeranged back and was super excited and is more passionate than ever. So the question is it fair to think that you see part of your role is to create the next generation of leaders?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like verbs like create, it put too much weight. It makes it feel like it's too much about you as a leader. But I do think that the opportunity when you're a CEO or leader is that these people, like a huge part of their life is work. That's just the reality. A lot of our lives are work. And you can do things that either make that better or worse, both in the company you're in as well as whatever they do in the future. And so for me, the joy is like literally, oh my gosh, like there are human beings, thousands of human beings that have worked for me now over the years. And those human beings, I can have a small positive impact in their life. It's not just me, it's them. They're the ones who do everything. But, the opportunity they get or the encouragement they get or the feedback, it can actually be a part of their life. And it's amazing. And it's part of their life forever, right? And that's an incredible opportunity. That is why, for me, leadership is so special. It's like impacting human beings' lives in a very different way, right? It's not like I'm saving the world or curing COVID, but like people's lives get affected by the way leaders work, and for good and bad. And I think that's what motivates me. Like literally an employee texted me yesterday and say, hey, can we chat, former employee, chat for career advice? A person inside Gainsight saying, yeah, they bought their first home because of, some of the money they made from Gainsight. These things are like unbelievably motivating. Yeah. So that's why I want to be a leader forever, to be honest, as long as I can.
I'm smiling, Nick, because you used the word joy, and it's just so descriptive for that. I was going to ask you for some, like, is there a story that you remember, but you talking about buying a first home or career advice and having that connection still, I think really sums it up. I look at very much the same, yeah, you're right. We're not doctors. We're not curing cancer or something like that. But as business leaders, you are creating jobs, which is creating commerce in this world.
Yeah.
And as we know, especially over the last couple of years, commerce has been hard. So I think that is a very important role. Yeah, very different than somebody that's like saving lives on a hospital bed, but also very important.
Very important. We impact lives. We may not save them, but we impact them in a real way.
Agreed.
By the way, again, it's like responsibility. You can impact in a really good way. You can impact in a bad way, and it's up to us,
Yeah, well said. All right, good. Well, so these previous two questions beg another question for me, which is succession planning. How do you think about this at your level? How do you think about And like, I'll give an example to the listeners here. Yesterday, prior to getting on this call, I met with your chief of staff to talk about, some of the ideas that I had, and she and I shared ideas. So clearly you've delegated to someone that knows a little bit about your creative thought process, your communication style, and she helped me shape some of the topics that I was going to ask about here. So succession planning, how do you think about that? And then do you instill that same idea down in the organization at the lower levels below you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that some of your questions reflect things that I feel like we do well, and some reflect opportunities. I think we do succession planning okay, not great. I think part of it is the way I think about succession planning. Part of it is like your company is not static. Your market is not static. What Gainsight needs to be in the future is very different from what it is and what it has been. And so being open to succession planning where the successor of a given function is not exactly the same as the person that's being succeeded, right? So you look at, like, let's say in a world like, I don't know, sales. I mean, this is the world you know better than anyone. And, the way you sell 2021, which is you just sell by everyone buys stuff all the time. Right. And now the way you sell, which is probably for most people much more challenging, right? As you get bigger, you do more enterprise deals. I know you also went through that. That is a huge change, right? So I think part of it is identifying that successors aren't going to be the exact same, and it's a mistake to think that they're the same. Part of it is obviously nurturing people internally. So clearly in some cases, internal succession can work great, and we've done that. My chief people officer used to be my chief of staff, and she's crushing it. She's amazing, right? But then part of it is also realizing you can't just do that. In fact, I would say we went through a phase. We were really grateful that we have a long tenure of employees. I mean, just you go to any meeting, it's like 7 years, 9 years, 10 years, 12. It's like amazing, and we're so lucky. But also, you can end up rotating too far into that. And so part of succession planning is realizing you need some outside thinking all the time. This is where a lot of boards deal with, internal succession CEO or outside CEO, right? That's a very common thing. And it's a pro and a con. The last thing I'd say in succession planning is, and I see this with public companies too, the internal candidate makes a lot of sense when things are fine and not changing. The external candidate makes a lot of sense when you need to reinvent. Every now and then an internal candidate is able to reinvent. So Satya Nadella is the ultimate all-time example at Microsoft. But most of the time, the reinvention comes from somebody that doesn't have the years of bias of just, this is the way we do things, right? And that's something that, like, even me as a CEO, almost 12 years in, we can talk more about it, but how do I reinvent my own job? That's a big part of it.
It's interesting you close on that point. There was a stage at Marketo where the CEO brought someone above me, like a presidential level. Yeah. And when he came in, he was a really direct communicator. He asked me, do you know why I have this job and you don't? And I said, years of experience, like some of the outcomes you've driven. He goes, yeah, those are all part, like that was, the cover charge to get in the door. He said, but the reason I have this job and you don't is you can do the demo of the product and I will never do the demo. It was kind of this mindset that the company needed an outside thinker that's not going to think in the context of how we built it. They're going to think about how we scale it. And it was a really interesting conversation. It shook me a little bit, but I was like, maybe I should grow dumb and stop doing the demo. And he's like, no. He's like, that's your value add. The goal here is that if you look at a skills map, I'm going to bring a different set of skills and you're going to bring those and we're going to team up together well.
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot about succession for me, not that I don't have any desire to now, right? But like this idea, who would be the CEO of Gainsight after me? And what would they do? And honestly, what would they come in and say, God, Nick was so dumb. He was doing X, Y, and Z. And then do some of those things now, right? So envision who that person is and be like, well, they would do these things. Why don't I just do them? They'll still do different things, but at least I can make it better for them, And so that idea of who is that future person, I think about all the time.
I remember when I was early in my career, Andy Grove, the old CEO of Intel, wrote this book, Only the Paranoid Survive. And he said every 6 months, his management team would do that test. They'd say, if a new hotshot came in and replaced us, what would they do that we aren't? And what would they stop doing that we are? So it was a good mental exercise. See, I knew why I was excited to have you on this, is these lessons in leadership that
It's so parallel to what you've been through. I love it.
share. So it's cool stuff. All right, let's stay on a similar topic here. I'm going to take you back a few years. You came in and shared the stage at a battery event back in 2022 with Pendo's CEO, my old boss, Todd Olson. We had 8 or 9 speakers on a whole afternoon that day, but I don't think I ever gave this to you, but the feedback of the session that you and Todd led was the highest rated of the day.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
We had a bunch of things that, again, like you do when you're having someone join you on stage, you say, look, let's take the topics, these directions. So you share some ideas. But while we were on that stage, I came up with some also, this would be an interesting question to ask these guys right now. And I remember asking you both, do you, at the size of your companies, and I think you're both over 100 million at this stage in ARR, do you still sit on the forecast call? And do you still interview every candidate that comes in and eventually joins your organization? And it was a fascinating example of, there's the left road and there's the right road.
Yes, I remember that.
And you guys had different opinions. And what was so wonderful, and the feedback that I said that rated so high, was there are all these 100 CROs in the audience listening that, okay, well, my CEO is that one. Well, my CEO is that one.
Yeah.
And the fact is, there is no one size fits all playbook. It was a really great session. So that's what drove the feedback. So the question is, you were on the side that you didn't still interview everybody. Why? Because at a certain stage, there were better people that were capable of that development function or that marketing function or that finance function, whatever the function was, at being able to assess the talent than you were. And so that you had released that. Likewise, with the forecast call, you said, look, there's experts that I've hired that have forgotten more about this skill set than I'll know. So occasionally I'll join to help out or to help, shepherd a specific deal, but that it wasn't the way. Todd's he was still very involved. So I'm just curious, for you, are there milestones or are there certain triggers that help you think about, it's time for me to pull back from being involved in, and those are 2 examples around hiring and around forecasts, but are there examples of where you maybe pull back from a certain task or a part of your job that you previously used to participate in?
I'm smiling ear to ear. First of all, I remember that panel so well, and you did a great job, and Todd's awesome. So I learned a lot. And it's funny because things change. So what's fascinating is I wasn't attending the forecast calls for 2 reasons. One is I had a CRO at the time who was a great guy, but he's like, hey, it's better if you're not on them. But second thing is, it was easy to sell back then. So I attend all the forecast calls now, Bill. Friday morning, 7:30 a.m. So that's changed. Absolutely. And I think that's the lesson there is I think you can dive in and swim up and dive in, and just based on whatever's needed, what are you digging into now? And one thing, like an analogy some CEO told me is, as a CEO, you're just a sprinkler head and you're just kind of moving area to area, and whatever it's broken or needs help, you're going to be on, and etc. So I would say that for me, I get more involved in certain things based on whatever's the most challenging or needs transformation. I'm hiring a new CRO starting in a couple weeks, and so that's that one. But actually, hiring, interestingly enough, that's been consistent for a long time. I interview some people. I think one of the things I did learn is I just don't think I'm good at it. If you had some statistics program and it's Nick's thought after an interview and then success years on, it's no correlation. In fact, I think the problem I have there is I like everyone. I like every human being, and I find something great in every human being. That sucks as an interviewing strategy, That's why I'd be a bad VC too, I think. But tying to how you think about where do you dive in and not, for me, I think there's some things that persistently, I think I'm just differentiatedly good at. And probably people could guess, customers. I talk to 15 or 20 customers every single week for 12 years, every single week, engaging employees, getting them excited, public, things like this, right? I'm really good at these things, and I'm just okay at other stuff. In fact, I just sent a Slack to my CFO and my head of strategy. I'm like, we need to reinvent the whole planning process at Gainsight and how we do exec meetings, offsites, etc. And I said, I'm not very good at this. You need to go meet spend a whole day, come back with what you think we should do. I'm not good at it. So I think part of it is being humble and saying, look, you're not going to be good at everything. So you need to be involved in everything. The worst thing you can do is be involved in something you're not good at, And that's one of the things for me that's been really helpful. Every now and then you need to get involved for awareness. But then you need to have somebody that you can say, go figure this out. And so as an example, we had a different one. This morning we have the backlog is too big in professional service. It takes too long to implement right now because basically people are really busy because we actually had some good sales last quarter. So anyways, I got a call with sales and finance and professional services. And I said, okay, I'm not an expert. Here sounds like there's the 4 issues. You guys go meet, present to me what you want to do. I'm not going to be in that call to go solve it. And so I've tried to do some more of that where I still have a responsibility to fix problems, but in many cases I'm the worst person at fixing them. So just define what the goals are. Literally, I dropped off the meeting. I was like, hey, bye everyone. I'm going to leave. No disrespect. I just think you guys can figure it out and then present it to me.
I think that's ultimate leadership right there. I mean, I've read a lot of books. There's a book, Multipliers by Liz Wiseman.
Great book.
Great book. And what that argument there is you don't learn how to drive the car sitting in driver's ed class. You learn to drive the car by putting your hands on the wheel. And what you just said there was, look, I'm going to give you, the team, the wheel, and then come back and present. And I might have some questions. I might have some directional steering that I can help with. But you do the work. And by the way, that's how you get good at doing something, right? Like you did the work and you watch someone else above you. You say, hey, I want to aspire to go do that job. It's like, okay, well, let's start giving you some of the ownership of that.
That's exactly right.
That's a great answer. And I love what you said about the worst thing you can do is being involved what you're not good at. I think that's a self-awareness trait of being able to say, like, look, as the CEO, you're right. You are that sprinkler head and you're going to have a purview to everything. But at the same time, knowing when it's time to pull back.
Totally agree.
I think you talk about this publicly about the Nick 2.0. It's along the lines of how do you keep reinventing yourself?
Exactly right. That's something that I've been thinking a lot about very recently because, again, the software world has changed so much. You don't have the zero interest rate tailwind that we didn't realize we all had, but now it's like, oh yeah, we were riding on that for 15 years, right? And then we also have AI as a huge opportunity, but also a threat for every company and probably even humans and whatever. And so it's a time for reinvention. So we launched what we call Gainsight 2.0 internally as a new iteration of our culture where we have the same values. We're very, very human company, care about each other. We call it kind of human first business, but we need to fuse in that relentlessness, that drive that this new world takes. So we actually introduced our new company mascot, which if folks have seen the internet meme from years ago, it's the honey badger, which is this weird animal that's relentless. And so we're honey badgers. People are using it all the time. But then it caused me to say, what is Nick 2.0? And honestly, being vulnerable, I went through some really hard stuff personally, a whole bunch of things. And then work is changed, right? And so I'm like, I need to be this new version of myself for my kids, my work, all that kind of stuff. And so I went through this, what is it? Who can I be in this next phase? I shared a lot of that with our company. And, part of it was just being more candid. I have, one of the things that I have is I love people. I love the goodness in every person. I want them to feel good. I'm very good at making them feel good. But sometimes that can hide the honest truth, right? And I think some other CEOs are incredibly, it's natural, the honest truth. They're not as good at the EQ side. In fact, I did a thing on Monday with, this amazing person who was Navy SEAL and then a CEO. And he was saying he worked for somebody who had a CEO in the past who had an IQ of infinity and EQ of 0. And I have probably a really high EQ, but sometimes my directness suffers, my candor. And so I've been working on being very candid. And that's Nick 2.0, right? And it fits with a tougher world, a more challenging world. And it's a little funny anecdote. I historically am the biggest prude in the world. I would never swear at all. I would never say any swear word. I would literally say HE double hockey sticks, not hell. I in Nick 2.0, I'm like, okay, every now and then it's okay to swear. And by the way, my company loves it. It's not common. I'm dropping F-bomb and they love it. And what's funny is there's a graph on the internet of number of swear words in each Taylor Swift album. And it was like 0, 0, 0, 0. And then the last few it went up. And it's somehow it's like, that's me too. So Nick 2.0, Gainsight 2.0, what's the next phase of what we need to be? Being willing to reinvent yourself and owning it.
So you just gave me a gold mine of things to ask about. So I'm going to double click here on a couple things.
Yeah,
One, I'll get to AI, but let's just stay on this, you reinventing and the vulnerability and the transparency. So Nick, anybody that does any research on you will see videos of you rapping. They'll see you dressing up in unique outfits. They'll see you driving customer carpool karaoke. You've mastered, or at least you've created a characterization of yourself that it's okay to have energy, to have fun, to have spirit, and that you don't take yourself too seriously. But you just talked about this with the directness. How do you balance that sometimes with the realities of running a business, especially when things aren't going well? Do your team sometimes forget you're the CEO and just remember you as this characterization that they see out there when you have to make hard decisions?
It's such a good question. And yeah, I've had to go through that personal pivot because there is a part of me. I mean, I've always felt like this positive energy towards other people. I love the creative side. It's kind of, there's something called Enneagram, which some people know. It's a personality test. And I am actually like, the most common CEO types are 3, which is about achievement, and 8, which is like that Steve Jobs type, like just direct, right? And I'm actually a 4, which is the kind of creative, introspective, philosophical type with a little bit of 3, which is the achievement. And so what that means is I naturally love making videos and writing funny posts or trying to make the employees laugh or a keynote at a conference that's not stiff. I love that. Like that's what brings me energy. But yeah, I figured out that like you need that. In fact, that's what motivates people through hard times. And if we lost that, we would lose a lot. But you also need the candor. And actually what's interesting is I've found that when you've been vulnerable and yourself and all that, transparent, creative, you actually have more permission to be candid. I was pretty worried about how that would go. We just did this company event in Vegas 6 weeks ago, had people together and it was awesome. But, I chose to we had a fun opening and all that, but I chose to then go to directness and people really valued it. They really liked it. When I said it's effing unacceptable that we're at this, by the way, we're more than 200 million revenue, we're profitable, all that. So we've done some amazing things, but I'm never satisfied. And so it's like, we need to go bigger. People loved that. And I think part of it is you earn the trust by caring about them as human beings. This is the whole principle of radical candor, right? Which is you're candid and you care at the same time. And I think people over time, if you do it right, can feel both of those things.
That's awesome. I was going to ask about that, like going back to the graph of the Taylor with the swear words. Is there a similar graph for you of opening up your vulnerability? Because I can't imagine you just came out that way out of college and was like, hey, I'm just going to tell you what I think and just be really down to earth and real. It seems like you probably grew that skill set.
I did, yeah. It's one of those things, probably most things in life that you have skills at were because somehow you tried it and then it worked and then you get better and it works better, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I have some backstories that my guess is everything comes from childhood. I was, I really just didn't know how to fit in. So I was super lonely as a kid, never had didn't sit with anyone at lunch, kindergarten through 12th grade. And it was definitely the extreme version of lonely. And my parents had a lot amazing, but it was all about achievement. So, which is quite common, obviously, for a lot of immigrant families. And so I had all these things and they stayed with me even to this day. And in the early days of Gainsight, we had this conference called Pulse, and we do it every year, and we've done it for 2013 to now, and thousands of people go to it now. And in some of the early ones, I started with a closing keynote, and actually the one specifically that was the beginning of what I'd call this era of Gainsight is in 2017. We did an employee event, and it's a normal employee internal event, and hey, presentation, here's all the great things happening at Gainsight, here's our future, da da da. And then at the end, I decided to close with a little bit of vulnerability, talking about being lonely as a kid. People loved it so much. In fact, the employees, what was cool is the employees in the rest of the event themselves were really vulnerable on stage. There was a woman named Julia, who's one of our product managers, still dear to me. And she got up on stage doing her own presentation in this internal event. And she was like talking. And then she's like, I want everyone to know I have a lot of anxiety about public speaking. And then everyone in the audience, all these employees were like, we love you, Julia. You can do this. And it was so powerful. I was like, wow, the power of vulnerability. So then we had a Pulse conference that year. And, it was a few thousand people that mostly I've never met before. And I closed out with basically the same talk about being lonely as a kid. And people loved it. I was pretty afraid, to be honest, Bill. How's it going to go? And there are a couple of people at Gainsight who are great people, but they're like, Nick, I don't know about doing this. Like, people want to see it. Tough CEO who's strong, and vulnerability that doesn't feel right. So it works so well. Then the next year, then the next year, then the next year. Now people just expect it. They're like, some people call the Nick makes everyone cry speech. And because I've talked about my dad having dementia, it was very hard, he passed away. My kids growing up, I've talked about all the things, and people really appreciate it.
God, well, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that, because I think that was kind of a greatest hits all in one right there that we got of your background as a child and how you went up that curve of growing. And look, there's a lot of different styles of leadership, right? Like I don't think that Steve Jobs, who you referenced earlier, was probably ever considered to be the most vulnerable type of person, yet he was ruthlessly effective. But I do, like as I've developed as a professional, I did find that, look, whether I had success or I was in a tough, like low valley, I always knew I was going to climb out and get back to having steady state. And so being consistent became really important to me. And earlier in your career, sometimes you get like a little bit of ego and you get a little bit of head on you. And then like you maybe go through a thing that wakes you up and says, okay, maybe you're not that great after all. So like I said, I have developed this kind of, I just want to be steady. I want to be real. And similar to you, like earlier today, or earlier in our session here, I mentioned that, look, there was a stage at Marketo that I got leveled. And that did not feel good.
I was just going to say, I can imagine, man, you were you built so much of that with Phil and everyone else, and that's a real human emotion.
It's right back to what you said, which is you're there for moments. And fortunately, I was allowed and performed at a level where I was able to keep a seat at the table. The seat moved. Yeah. The seat moved.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful 10 years professionally. The growth, the experience was everything I could ask for it. From a reputational perspective, it was great for me. But most importantly, it was a learning period.
Yeah.
And so I really look back on that with that same kind of mindset that you talk about there. One last biz question. We'll close out with kind of a fun one again. You went down this road a minute ago about AI. I know that you made an acquisition recently of Staircase AI. Yeah. This session wouldn't be complete if we didn't touch on this. The impact that AI is now having, a lot of people are talking about three main areas, specifically the SaaS software, that's going to have impact. Number one is in development and how you code and how you generate code. Number two is marketing and the messaging and how you reach your customers. And third is 100% in your domain is customer success and how we serve the customer. As a person that's, renowned in this space and leads a software company that's built on driving customer success, would love to get your thoughts of AI and the impact that you see it having inside of that area.
Yeah, totally. We thought, obviously, this is, so much of what I think about, as we talk about what are the things you like and you're good at. And I am such a nerd. So this is like the nerd's paradise era of like life where it's like, oh my gosh, all the sci-fi novels that we all read as kids are happening, which is exciting and also probably scary, but exciting. And so I spent a lot of time on this, and also my president, this guy, Chuck Gonapathy, the two of us are just obsessed with this. And so we actually use the same terminology that we talk about with our culture. We call it human first AI. And what we mean by that is how do we actually use AI to actually bring the best out of humans at our customers? So in this case, like a lot of the people that CSMs and other people that deal with customers, as well as with their customers. How do you actually drive human success through AI, right? Because it's a good different way than AI is just replacing jobs. So we have 6 things that we think are part of what we call the human first AI playbook. I'll quickly go through them. So 3 are about how do you make employees more effective in software companies. One of them is eliminating the blind spots, the surprises, the surprise churn, the surprise risk, the support escalation. You can do so much around that. That's what this company Staircase does. He analyzes emails and all that and other recordings. You can remove the grunt work. One of the things I know in the future, a few years from now, is our salespeople and CSMs and whatever are not going to be typing data into Gainsight or Salesforce. We have to, nobody likes that. And
Right.
we have to eliminate that. It's very possible. The third one for employees is we call it make every teammate the best teammate. What we mean by that is how do you pool the knowledge in a company? So if you're a CSM or salesperson, you're working with a customer or prospect, they may ask you, hey, how does your product work in our industry? Let's say they're a healthcare company. If you're the sales rep or CSM that has another healthcare customer, great. You're going to be like, oh, let me show you what I did with this other customer. But if you don't have other ones and other people do, what do? You go on Slack or Teams and you say, does anyone have a customer that's doing X? No reason you should do that. In fact, we have something now that basically pool the knowledge, and just ask it the question. And then there's 3 that are about making your customers humans more successful. That's basically the world of self-service in a better way. So better community interaction. So you can find like the best customer for your customer to talk to, better learning, not the old school like videos and all that, better ability to like have, in the Pando world, we have something called PX. In that world, better stuff in the product to guide people through it through AI. So there's such a huge opportunity to help human beings and also help our businesses at the same time. So yeah, you can tell I'm very excited about it.
I can tell. It's interesting, the paradigm of your employees and the customers is the mindset. A lot of folks I speak with right now, they're looking at AI, think about, well, how's this going to impact my product and how is this going to impact my company? Like the workflows, the processes. And I think I could apply those to that, right? The workflows and processes really goes to your employees of, like you said, removing that grunt work and eliminating blind spots. And then your customer, how's the product going to advance to make their lives better as they go?
Exactly.
So I like the paradigm that you're using there. Cool. Thank you for sharing that. Well, let's take it home with this. So a few years ago, I was at SaaSter and I saw my old CEO from Marketo, Phil, up on stage presenting a session called 10 Things I Would Do Over Again If I Were to Do It Over Again. And then I think it said in parentheses, which I'm not going to. But a similar question for you. 12 years at Gainsight. If you look back on that entire wonderful run, are there certain things that you look back that you would say distinct pivotal moment that I would change? A hire, a key decision point, a certain investment you made, anything along those lines that you would make a distinct change on?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the beginning, we would have done, Amazon or Snowflake instead of Gainsight. And so, but the starting idea, actually, joking aside, we've had a good starting idea, but it does matter. Listen, you're working at a VC firm. That's obviously the most pivotal decisions, like the market you're in. But when you're in the market, I think one of the big decisions is how you do capital allocation. So how you decide to raise capital and how you use it. And I think people are much smarter about that now. But, in the bubble, it was like, hey, raise as much money as possible. And, we're very fortunate that we didn't raise a crazy amount. We raised 150 million. But even then, there's no doubt we wasted 75 million of that, and we could have gotten the same stage with 75 million less. I see a lot of entrepreneurs who've been, they bootstrap or whatever. And so I think there's it's really eliminating the FOMO. I remember one of our investors who's amazing. I was like, at the time, I was like, oh, how come we're not whatever. Actually, ironically, so how come we're not growing as fast as Zenefits? I asked him that. And no, in hindsight, Zenefits ended up going out of business. But I asked him, and he's like, dude, you're running the company you run. Don't worry about other companies. Totally. Do the right thing for you. So to me, that's the biggest one. Is really accepting you're in a certain market, it's growing at a certain rate, win the market, but don't apply some arbitrary strategy. So what does that practically mean? And so many companies do this. We hired too many reps. We spent too much on marketing early on. The market wasn't ready. We were 80% of the market, but it wasn't ready for this next phase. And so the patience to say sometimes be the tortoise, don't be the hare. And now that luckily the tortoise strategy's worked out well for us. I mean, we've gotten, probably to a milestone that maybe, 1,000 companies ever have gotten to in terms of software, but it's all tortoise. It's all tortoise. It's not hare. Some businesses are about being the hare, but most of them are about being the tortoise.
Gosh, Nick, we have honey badgers in this conversation. We have tortoises. We have
all animals, exactly.
All bunch of animals. That's great. I'll give a couple comments to wrap up there. On the spend less and be the tortoise, really tough if you think about 3-4 years ago saying those words,
yeah.
right?
Right.
You called it out about 2021 when, the selling environment was much easier. So I think that's really thoughtful to think back and learn. And I think that's really going back to our leadership comments. I think that's one of my goals with these sessions is that someone listening picks up on something that they might not have experienced yet. Maybe they grew up mostly in that era of where the market was great. It was a zero interest time frame. And now all of a sudden they're having to learn new skills. So I think there's great things that you're sharing there inside of that. So with that, I think that'll bring us to a close. I want to thank you for being so real on this call, and as always, bringing the energy that you do. Nick, when TJ suggested that we have you on the program, I thought, like, wow, I haven't talked to him a couple years in this kind of format. That'd be great. And man, I'll tell you, 10 out of 10, you delivered.
Oh man, thank you so much. And you asked some great questions, did great research. This is really fun for me too. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, Nick.
Awesome.